Afternoon. I'm Jason Schoenholtz of Trident Management. Thank you for joining us today. I wanted to take some time to talk about engineering, and because of that, I brought a guest with me today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Helmut Mueller. I'm with Mueller Plaza Consulting, LLC. I am a Florida licensed PE, Florida licensed special inspector. I'm also an SE, structural engineer. Pleasure to be here with everyone. I hope that our conversations today will possibly alleviate some of your concerns about your building structure and what's to come in the very near future in South Florida.
So I've had the opportunity to work with Helmut a couple of times on construction projects and engineering projects. So that's why I brought him out here today to talk with us. I wanted to have the opportunity to speak with somebody who is a professional in the industry, and who can speak to, some of the things that we're seeing today regarding recertifications and things like that. And somebody whose opinion, I think has value to me and would to our clients. So that's why I brought him here. So I'm going to start a little bit about some of the background of 40 year, because I get a little geeky on it. So I guess I'll do it. So the 40-year recertifications are a Dade County unique thing, right? They started here in Dade County because, unfortunately, in '74, a building in downtown, the parking garage collapsed, and we lost a number of federal agents in the collapse. These were people that were just going about their daily lives, and their parking garage just collapsed underneath them. So because of that, a group of engineers got together. They put together a law they call the 40-year recertification codes. And after that, any building that reached 40 years in age or 10 years thereafter is required to be recertified by a structural engineer and electrical engineer to say that the building is safe for occupancy. So, Helmut, but we say that you guys are inspecting the building, but you're not in there like jackhammering on anything.
No, the current, it's only basically a visual inspection currently at this time. So we're doing a visual observation based on knowledge that we have as structural engineers and what to look for, be that column to slab connection, column to beam connection, shear walls, stairwells, things of that nature that we can visibly see. There is no stipulation currently for any destructive testing, which would be a good idea, pending what the result is of what happened recently up in Surfside.
I think you're right. I think we're going to see some drastic changes in the coming months and years here. But right now, all we're getting, or what we're required to do, I should say, is this visual inspection that you guys do. You have a checklist that you follow that says, I checked this, that, the other. And then you always combine that with pictures and notes of what to see, notes of what you see, and anything that needs correction, right?
Correct. Although the pictures are not really part of the required submittal to the jurisdiction that we're submitting to. Basically, they have a format that we are to fill in. It's basically a plug and chug, as we used to say in college, where we just fill in the information that we observed. And that information gets even as intense as pitch on the roof. Is there pitch on the roofing? Which is something that, we can talk about a little bit later.
Okay. So we've got our 40-year recertification. That's kind of what we're talking about today. The same thing happens 10 years later and every 10 years thereafter, correct? So
Correct.
You guys come back and take a look and say the building looks okay or it doesn't, and we go from there. So that's kind of the background of what we wanted to talk about. So I think what we should kind of get into is maybe let's get into how do we prep for a 40-year recertification, and then really what goes a little deeper into maybe what goes into the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. So I thought I'll start with on our side. So the 40-year recertification is not this grand number that's the day we should start working. 40 is not this magic number. It's the next time that we have to inspect. Our hope is that you as a building or an engineer or an association or a building owner have been maintaining your building for the last 40, 50, 60 years. We know we have buildings in this country and in this world that are hundreds of years old. So obviously those are maintained properly to get there. So what we want to see is, we want to make sure that you're not waiting for that trigger, and that people are prepping for it on a monthly, yearly, daily basis. We're checking out our buildings and taking care of any problems that you see. But we've all now gotten to that point. It's so many years, it's almost 40 years. It's time to prepare. So for us, what we like to do is on a larger building, we want to go about 38 years out. We go, okay, guys, the 40-year birthday's coming. We're getting our birthday hats and our balloons, but first we got to do our health check. So
Correct.
Our hope is that about 2 years earlier, we're reaching out to somebody like yourself and saying, time for that preliminary inspection.
Correct.
So we do our bids, we pick our engineer, and our engineer comes out and he does his preliminary inspection. So what's your preliminary inspections look
Basically, preliminary inspections, we do a walk around. We bring a set of high-power binocular. We try to get to adjacent building structures up on their roof so we can see. It depends on the height of the building, size of the building. We try to get on the building's roof. We try to walk the stairwells. We try to walk the building completely at grade. Look at all of again, it depends on the type of construction. That's one thing that the 40-year doesn't really break apart, is the different types of construction that we see here in South Florida. Yes, the majority of it is concrete moment frame or concrete frame with masonry infill and stucco over everything. But there also is several other types of construction here that are curtain wall extensive, which would be your glass exterior buildings. You've got also buildings here in South Florida that are erected with a facade of either a stone or a coral stone or a limestone. You've also got some buildings, believe it or not, with terracotta here in South Florida. So there is quite a few different elements that are used in the building process. So depending on the type of building, the height of the building, the size of the building, and the areas that are accessible, that's going to kind of be dependent on how much time we're going to have to spend on the site and how many variables are going to come to play as far as our initial inspection.
So then you've done your initial inspection, you have some time to digest it, you put together this report that's 2 pages, 200 pages, depending on the size of the building. And that goes back to management or the board if there's no manager. And they take a look at it and they say, okay, there's 5, 10, 15, 100 things here I have to fix. So
correct. And they're responsible to go back and to make those things correct prior to their submittal.
Don't we typically reach out to you for plans and specifications for that kind of stuff?
That's typically the procedure. We'll create plans, we'll bid the work, we'll look at. Typically, it's not that much. Now, if a building, when you hit your first 40 year and you've been doing maintenance periodically over those 40 years, whether that be, periodic, we recommend if you have a stucco building that's painted, we recommend 5 to 10 years. You repaint that building every 5 to 10 years. Believe it or not, that painting will save you so much money after 40 years in concrete repair and stucco replacement. So yeah.
So you've got us the plans and specifications. It's back onto management to go out and get the bids together. Yes. You help us with that pre-bid walkthrough, which is my favorite thing to do. Grab all the contractors together, get them out there and say, this is what we're doing. Let's fix it now. Get them to bid on it, get the repairs done, find a way to fund it, finally get everything done, and then have you come back out at the end of that very quick process that just took me 2 years. So that you can do basically the same inspection all over again almost, right?
Correct. But now there's not really an inspection required. Now depending on the severity of the work that was done, now we've hung on the building. We've been on pipe scaffolding on the building. We've been around the building, and if not a daily, at least a weekly basis. We've seen a lot more of the building. We've gotten into possibly some of the units inside the building. There's a lot more that we know about the building now after this process is completed. So typically, if all the items that we've addressed have been addressed as from the property standpoint, there really is even not a need to come back and visit because we've already visited, we've got our photographs, we've got our special inspector reports, everything has already been documented and submitted. So all we have to do is update that 40-year narrative that we put together 2 years ago and boom, and stamp it and off it goes.
So, I mean, we're running through it rather quickly here, but the reality is it's a very slow process, right?
Yes, it is very slow. And it's not only from the engineering standpoint and putting together the documents and the bids, and it's also, the association, they have to get their monies together. They all have to vote on it. The whole process, and I'm sure whoever's watching this knows, the process that's involved to make something happen like that is very time consuming and can take up to, I've seen it take up to 2 years to actually get started on a building.
Yeah. So the point of all that was, like I said, in the ideal world, we're not starting this project at 40 years. We're starting it at 37, 38, maybe even 35 years.
Which is
if
a good,
if you know your
I
project.
I like your 2 year window,
Yeah.
which is really good because, like I said, I've seen these things drag on for 2 years before they actually get started.
Yeah. Because the last thing we want to have is, I've walked into properties that we weren't managing, that somebody else was, and we're turning in we're finishing up their 40-year recertification at the 48-year mark. So it's like turn in the report and turn around and do the 50.
I don't think that's going to be happening
Yeah, thankfully, well, not thankfully, but the reality is that things are changing, right? So
Right.
I think everybody who's stalled on things, that's kind of going to go away, which ultimately is a good thing for our industry. It's a good thing for the residents in the building and all of that. So that's kind of our takeaway from what we've seen happen here. So I guess the other things that we could kind of get into are, we've talked a little bit about what gets done and how it gets done. Do you have anything that you think is great? What are your best practices for working with either a property manager or a board of directors, or the things that they should be looking out for either before they get started or along the way?
Well, it's very easy for a property manager. I don't know how, Jason, how you guys, if you guys go out to your properties periodically and just do
Absolutely.
a walk around, take a look, that's probably one of the best, most effective ways to get on top of something quickly.
Yeah.
Just a periodic, it could be like once a month, it could be once every couple, bi-weekly.
Yep.
Just take a walk around, take a look up. Most people don't even look up. They walk in and out of the building and they don't look up one time.
Yeah.
I always look up just because I've done so much work on exteriors and I've pulled off so many dangerous things that could have killed someone that I don't even walk close to a building. If I'm like downtown, or I walk all the way out. I try to stay away from facades just because they scare the crap out of me.
Well, you don't know it until you look at it, right? So
And most
you
people
take
never
that
look
assumption.
up, unfortunately.
People don't look up, and I'd say to my managers, you got to make sure you're not getting, and it's a weird term in Florida, you're not getting snowblind, right? Like, and I say this to my managers and to my owners, you walk down that same hallway 25 times, you see the same thing, you start to forget about it, right?
Right.
You need to look at it every time with fresh eyes, and that's why we try and make sure that the manager's walking it, the board members walking it. I'll try and sneak into a property and walk it once in a while, because that way we get different eyes looking at it
That's
too.
the best thing, to look around the walls, to look at the columns, to look at the column to the slab connection, just to visually look at it. Does it look tight? Does it look solid? Is it bulging? Is it cracking? Does it look shifted? Is there settlement? Does it look like it's sinking? There's things that the naked eye can see. Like I can almost tell if something is level just by looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
You can see, hang a picture on the wall. You
Yep.
sit down. You can tell right away. It's
Could
not
you come into my
straight.
office after and check my pictures?
But the naked eye is pretty good.
Yeah.
A lot of these things that you can see with the naked eye are very hard to catch with a camera.
Yeah.
So imagine our job as engineers trying to explain something that we're up on a swing stage and we have to try and get a picture that you can actually visually see it.
Yeah.
The naked eye is much better at depth perception and visualizing things versus a picture.
No, it's true. The ability to see in 3D is
Right.
so much different than what we see in a picture. What about we see the crack, right? I guess what I'm getting at is we want to make sure that you're actually fixing it right away, right? Because it makes a huge difference.
You have to be careful too, because at the end of the day, the nature of concrete is it cracks. Okay. Why does it crack? Well, because there's certain stresses that occur when it's curing that cause it to want to crack. And depending on the way the reinforcing is laid out inside the concrete, depending on the location where the concrete is in the structure, basement walls, you see vertical cracks all day long. If it's just you don't have basements in Florida, but you have garages that are underground.
Yeah.
You see vertical cracks all day long. Now, those vertical cracks in walls in a lower level garage, those are shrinkage cracks. It's the concrete shrinking and it's walking away from the path of least. Concrete will always crack. It'll take the path of least resistance.
Okay.
It's very lazy. It likes to crack where the cross section is the thinnest. So we'll find that thinnest cross section will crack right there. And typically in a parking garage, in a wall, in a lower level garage, if you see a vertical crack well, it's not, the building's going to fall down. It's a shrinkage crack. Hydrophobic inject it, seal it, do something to it. But if you see a horizontal crack, now you need to call a structural engineer. There's a structural issue with the wall.
Okay.
So there's certain things, that cracks, you don't want to you don't want to raise the red
So be
flag right
aware,
away.
right? So be aware of what's out there for
Right.
sure. Notice what's going on, but it doesn't mean you have to instill panic because you see a crack.
Correct.
It means you need to pay attention to what's there,
Question it,
take the next
maybe
step,
pick up the phone.
be intelligent about it,
Right.
and figure out what's the cause of it. Because as you said, we live in a society we live in a world where the building does flex a little bit, and there's some stucco
100%.
cracking all the time,
Yep.
which is legitimate. We just want to make sure that that's waterproof to keep the water out of it.
Yes.
But we don't need to have a panic over it. But at the same time, if we see a crack, we need to know whether it's this or that, right?
Correct.
And not everybody's going to know it. So let's bring it up to management. Let's bring it up to the board or whoever it is.
Yeah, have we seen
so
this
that they can
before?
look
How
at
long
it.
has this been here? I just saw this.
Okay.
Is this new? Oh, that's been there for 10 years. Oh, okay. It's probably shrinkage.
Okay. That's great. That's good to know. I know one of your other things that you and I have dealt with in the past that's pretty concerning, not concerning, but it's pretty common in South Florida is the shallow pour. We see that all the time too, right?
Shallow pour.
Not enough concrete around the
The cover,
rebar.
concrete cover around
I
the
call it
steel.
shallow pour. You call it
I call
cover.
it concrete cover, which
Yeah.
that's that gets into the quality that you're dealing with on some of these developers that put these buildings together.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't know why it happens. Maybe there's not enough inspection that's occurring during the actual construction of buildings. But
Yeah.
we've done a lot of restoration projects that they could have saved the building a lot of money if they just would have, when they pour the concrete, to make sure that the steel reinforcing, depending on if it's a slab or a beam or a column, there's a what's called the ACI 318, which is the governing structural design code for concrete structures.
Okay.
And in ACI 318, it specifies minimum bar covers, reinforcing cover for concrete, like a slab edge, 1.5 inches minimum. An edge below grade, anything in soil, concrete, you need to have a 3-inch cover. There's different stipulations for the amount of concrete cover. Obviously, if you pour the concrete for your concrete floor and nobody decide they're going to put tile, usually they tie all the steel together so that when they pour it, it doesn't move around. I mean, think about it. Concrete weighs 150 pounds per cubic foot.
Okay.
It's more than me. It's just standing on there. So try stand. You can shift the bars around really easily. Have to
Very
tie
true.
everything really good together, or the concrete shifts everything around during the pour. That's obviously what's happening in a lot of these buildings. They're pouring, the stuff's moving around, and now you get a building with bars that are exposed all over the place, and at slab edges, at columns, at beams. Wow, we've got a big problem. But now we have to address, do we cut the bar out? Do we cast more concrete over the surface? We have to look at it from a structural standpoint and look at it a certain way, because we cannot leave that reinforcing bar exposed out to the outdoor elements, as it will completely corrode and it will become an issue that begins to compromise the structural integrity of whatever element that we're dealing with.
So that's another critical item that we have to pay attention to
Yes.
as managers, as board members. That it's just a common thing here in South Florida, right? We see it all the time. So be aware of it. You see that little rust line, that brown line in your concrete on your walkway. There's something below it. There's a reason it's happening. So get to it early, because the earlier you get to it, the sooner you stop the rust, the sooner it stop it. The sooner you stop it, the less expands, the less it goes, right?
Yeah, once it starts,
Thank you. That's what I was trying
it
to
gets
say.
going and it starts moving.
Yeah.
And and the thing is too, when you do it, say you repair that section, well, this is concrete repair gets into it's very electrical. There's electrical currents that are moving around in the concrete. And so you say you repair that one area where that corroded steel was. Well, now you come back a year later and you've got a new developed area of corrosion right next to the area that you just repaired. We call that the halo effect. There's actually a name for that.
Okay.
And that's why we get into these now. They have very fancy concretes that are not only polymer modified, but they have supplemental corrosion inhibitors put into the mix of the concrete. And we also have what I like to refer to as hockey pucks that we put
I've
into
seen
the
those
repairs.
discs you put in,
They're
right?
discs. I call them
Yeah.
hockey pucks. They're
Yeah.
like a little hot, and it's tied to the bar, clean bar, and those actually negate that halo effect. You put those around your repair area because now the corrosion was coming to those, all the chlorides were coming to that area where the corrosion was occurring. So now the chlorides, they don't know where to go. So they're trying to travel
So they're looking
to
for
other
somewhere
areas
else.
to start. So they're still coming there though, looking for that area, but that area is gone.
Yeah.
It's repaired. So that's usually why you get an area that starts up right adjacent to an area you just repaired.
So that's why we've seen for years, right? The building finishes their concrete restoration, and 2 years later, now they're fixing the next 6 feet, and 5 years later,
Because
they're
of the
fixing the
halo
next 10
effect.
feet.
Yeah, you can actually Google it. You can read about it.
Okay.
It's very interesting, electrochemical process the corrosion process.
Engineers, I swear, thank God for them. All right, we've talked a little bit about what to do and how to do it. We've talked about best practices a little bit. I don't know. I think for a few minutes, let's just talk about what you and I let's pontificate. Right? There's some changes coming down the road. We started to we've talked about this outside of this, and there's some changes that I think we're going to see in what's today's 40-year called the 40-year recertification.
Yes, I think so.
And what could be there. And these are just wild speculation as to things that we could see and kind of, just to get everybody's mind going and what we think we could possibly see out there. What I thought was interesting that you brought up when we were talking earlier is right now, the 40-year recertification takes everything and throws it in a box, whether it's an apple, an orange, a pear, or whatever, and it's all 40 years. Great, have a good time, go get it fixed. It would be interesting to me, and you were talking about this earlier, to see that we have these different building types, right? We've got CBS block, we've got, you'll do it better than I will. We've got all these different
Curtain
types
walls,
of buildings.
terracotta, masonry,
Right.
stone. There's a lot of different building types.
And we can't treat everything as the same, it's not the same fruit. They're all different, right? So
All different.
it would be interesting to see if we start to see different practices for different properties,
Yes.
This
Like,
one's at 10, this one's
say-
at 50, this one's at 70.
like a curtain wall system where you don't have much corrodable metal involved. You have a steel structure, you're a steel frame, you have a steel curtain wall glazing system. You could push that out to, instead of 40, you could maybe go 50, 60, depends. If you don't have exposed corrodable metal, you're completely capped and covered. You can visually see the structural steel. Those types of buildings, you don't really need to do that intensive of a
The 40 year isn't going to
inspection.
do anything for that.
No, I mean, you can see it. It's there. It's exposed. It's protected, and it's
And then
good.
the other side of that conversation is we have buildings that probably shouldn't wait till 40, right?
No, they shouldn't.
So, unfortunately, as we said earlier, people tend to say, at 40, I'll look at it, right? So maybe we need to consider moving up or shortening that time frame just because people need that onus on them in order to get things done, right? And that's the whole point of it, you know?
Yes.
So I think we're going to see stuff like that.
Hopefully, they get that right, because if they don't get that right, you're still going to have these same issues. Now, I mean, I know there's other jurisdictions in other states that have completely different practices. They do address different building types in their critical facade inspections. They don't just look at 40 years.
Mhm.
They actually look at the building type, and they have the building types categorized 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then based on what category that building falls under, this is when your inspection needs to be done, and this is what needs to be done.
I think that would be an interesting change to see. I just, as you and I were saying, I mean, my hope is that they bring in the right people to come up with these changes, that it's not just, whoever the elected official is at the time, that they bring in the right engineers, architects, managers, attorneys to kind of get involved in what gets done. And that we start to see a real change in it and the process of how it gets done and when those triggers take place. And the next part of the conversation, which really isn't so much to do with engineering, is really ultimately how do we pay for it and reserving for it. And
Yeah, well, that's another thing too I wanted to bring up too. In addition to categorizing the buildings, I really think that there should be some requirements for some destructive investigation as well, whether that's one opening per elevation or one opening per every other elevation. There should be a minimum amount maybe of swing stage drops depending on the height of the building. There's really a lot of considerations that I think need to be addressed in order to help evaluate these buildings a little bit better, because right now every building is getting the exact same evaluation, and to some of the buildings that's not fair. To some of the buildings they should be getting evaluated a lot more.
Yeah. No, I think your idea that we may need to do some invasive or destructive testing is a reality. You know, a visual test is only going to take you so far. You know, we go to the doctor, he looks at us, but he also sends us for more invasive testings.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, and we're just one person, not something holding up a lot of people. So, all right, I think we've talked about a lot of stuff. There's a lot for people to digest.
It is a lot, but I think it's also important that people understand. I mean, we really can't speak so much about what's to come until it actually comes. But I think that they're going to get the right heads together, and they're going to make some decisions. And I think those decisions are ultimately going to affect all of us in our day-to-day lives and our buildings. But hopefully that they come up with the right solution, and that we don't have these types of events that occur that don't need to occur.
I think it's going to be a little bit of what the government does, and I think a lot of it's going to be what those of us outside of government do, right?
Correct.
So I think it's going to be a lot of people like the association managers getting together and say, look, maybe it's 40 years out there, but here we're going to do our inspections every 10 years, regardless of what government says.
You don't see that much, though.
We don't.
It's very
we
uncommon.
we don't until now, right?
Yeah.
But I think that the conversation is changing. People are finally awake to what happened. You know,
I hope so.
The same things that happen after any kind of watershed event are finally happening here, and I think that's kind of the takeaway that I've seen for me personally, and I've tried to impart into my team here. Right? There was a horrific event that just happened, and we're trying to figure out how can we make it what positives can we take out of it. And the positives that we're taking out of it is that, you know, this is a wake-up call to the rest of us that being able to pay for something is not a reason not to do it anymore. You have to find a way to pay for it.
Well, I did hear also that they are creating a fund. I don't know if you heard this, that the government's creating a fund here in South Florida where if the building has an issue paying, that there will be a fund that they can draw from. So
that would be an interesting thing.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. But that conversation is tremendous that, you know, you can't say I can't afford it anymore. You got to find a way.
Not an option.
And the reality that you can't stick your head in the sand, right? You have to get in there and take a look at it. If there's a problem, you need to know what it is and come up with a plan and actually address it. And hopefully to what we'll see now in the next months and years to come is that people are being proactive about stuff. And when you're getting called to a property, it's not because they need the report yesterday. It's because they're planning for their report 6 weeks, 6 years from now.
Which is some reason I like working with your company so much, because you guys are very proactive.
Thank you.
In getting those things addressed and making sure that everything is correct. I like that.
So it's critical. I mean, at the end of the day, you feel like we feel. We're taking care of somebody else's home, right?
Yes.
My wife kills me because I take care of their homes better than mine.
Same here.
My honeydew list at home is much longer than the ones at my buildings, but
of course.
I'll continue to leave things that way, and she can yell at me about the light bulbs. It's okay. So anyway, Helmut, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I think this was it was great talking to you about this stuff.
Thank you for having us.
I always enjoy having you around, and your opinion is tremendous, and I appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you all.